Okay, so now that we have this first section done, where it's pulling back those two client records, what we're going to want to do is make each of these clickable. And whenever we click on, for example, Becky's Hair Salon, we want to see any messages from Becky's Hair Salon. And when we click on Smith Enterprises, we want to be able to see the messages from Smith Enterprise. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go back in and we're going to want to set up our table. So let's go ahead and add a new table. And let's go ahead and rename this table. Let's call this chats. Now there's really only 3 fields that we need. We want to have a field for the actual message, and then we want to have a sender ID so we know who sent the message, and then we want to have a receiver ID, the person that's going to be receiving those messages. So let's go ahead and let's create our first one. Let's call this messages. And this is going to be of type single line text. Hit save. Let's add in our sender ID. This will be of type number because it's going to be the integer. And then one more is going to be the receiver ID. And that will also be a number as well. Okay, so now we can go back to our front end here. And one of the things that we're going to want to do is we're going to create a variable. So let's create a new variable. So we'll come up here to variables. And let me just move myself out of the way. We're going to create a new app variable. And we're going to call this current client. And this is going to be a type of model. So whenever you're just trying to do one single record from a database, you just choose just model. Whereas a collection would be all the records in the database. We're going to select a model. This is going to be of type users and hit save. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new front end action. So the idea is whenever we click on this big div block that contains everything, we want to then set the current client. So in our example here, this is Becky's Hair Salon. So we actually want to set that variable to be Becky's Hair Salon, so that we can then pull that information in from over here. So let's go ahead and create a new front end action. And we're going to create a new front end action. And let's go ahead and rename this to set current client. Okay. Now, there's going to be a couple variables that we're going to need here. The first one is we're going to need an input variable. Let's go ahead and name this set current client input client. And this again is going to be a model of type users, because we want to pass in that whole users. Okay, so now we got our input variable. Next, we're going to actually create a couple of other variables. The first one we're going to want to create is going to be called chats container class. And we're going to want to put the expression of chats dash container. And then we're going to hit save. Then we're going to need another variable. And this is going to be a variable that's going to sleep for a sleep period of time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set this to 1 second that it's going to actually pause, and you'll see why in just a second. Okay, so we'll name this sleep 1 second. The expression is going to be 1,000, and that is 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. And so this actually is technically going to be in milliseconds, but with 1,000, that means it's going to sleep for 1 second. Right, next is going to be time to add an event. And the first event that we're going to want to do is we want to set that variable. So we're going to go to variables set field. And the variable that we are going to want to set is current client. And hit OK. And then the value is going to be set current input client. And this is our input variable that we're doing, and hit OK. And then let's go ahead and add a description here. And we're going to say set current client here and hit save. So that's going to set that variable. Next, we're going to add another event. This time we are going to run an endpoint, and this is going to be get chats by sender. Okay, and let's go ahead and put our response as get chats by sender. And then again, we always put AS at the end, and then get chats by sender response. And then we're going to have to pass in the sender ID. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set the sender ID. And this one is going to be set current client input client, and we're going to choose the actual ID portion of that and go ahead and hit save. Next, we're going to want to add another event here. This time though, what we want to do, instead of running an endpoint, let's go ahead and go to flow control condition, and we want to make sure that that actually returned a valid return of 200. So let's go into our get chat by sender response, and that should equal our HTTP success code, which again is set by Dittofi as 200. Hit save. And then click the three dots here. We're going to add an event inside. And for this one, instead of running an endpoint, let's go ahead and go to variable set field. The variable that we're going to want to select is going to be the get chats variable, which is of type collection. Hit OK. And then the value of that, we're going to want to get the get chats by sender AS collection. And then don't forget to hit save. Okay, now that that's done, let's add another event below. And this is going to be a new one. And this is going to be sleep. So let's see where we need to go for that. Here we go, flow control sleep. And the variable that we're going to set here is going to be this sleep 1 second variable. So let's go ahead and type that, sleep 1 second. And as you can see, it's grayed out. We can't actually select it because we kind of made a mistake here. So that was set to type text, when really it needs to be set as a type of number. So let's change this to number. And then let's change that to 1,000. Let's see. And now if we go back to here, we can go back to our flow control, sleep. And now we should be able to set that variable here to sleep 1 second, which is now of type number. And then hit save. And that should cover that action. Now let's go back to our page here, and let's select this whole entire row here. And we'll go to the lightning bolt in the top right here, and we're going to add an action. Whenever we click on this entire row, we're going to want to run that new set current client. And it is going, because we had that input variable, so if you go back to your front end actions, let's go back, set current client, see we have this input variable of set current input client. So now we actually have to set that right here. And what we'll do is we'll choose the repeating group and then the entire row. So that way we can pass all this information on to the next side. And then hit OK. And so far, so good. Okay, so now we can move on to the right side here. let's start with the heading. Let's click the gear icon. We're going to change this to a variable. And we want to choose set current, current client. And we'll do first name here. And then instead of hitting OK, let's go back. Let's go into formula. We're going to copy this whole thing. And then still inside the curly brace here, we're going to add a plus sign. And then let's just Control V to paste that again. Let's change this to from first name to last name. That way it's going to return the person's first and last name. And actually, we probably should add another space here. So we'll do a quote, space, quote, and then add another plus sign. And that should give us that. And then hit OK. There we go. Now, there's going to be a problem with this. And let me see if we can go ahead and build this code and see if I can show you this problem. When we refresh our page here, we're going to get an error. It's saying cannot read properties of undefined reading first name. Now, if we go back and we look here at our pages, and we have this set. Now, the problem with this is that whenever this page loads, this variable is actually not set yet. Remember, we don't actually set this until we actually click on this. So we have to do one more thing. So we have to come in here and let's click on this gear icon again. And there's a show option. And so what we want to do is we want to only show that if current client is set. So that's what it should look like. So basically we're saying, listen, only show this if we actually clicked here and we set that current client. So let's build our code again, and let me see if I can show you what that looks like. This time, let's come back and let's refresh the page. There we go. Our page does load. Notice here, we haven't clicked on anything yet. There is nothing there. So now let's click on it. And there we got Becky's name. Let's click on Smith Enterprises, and we have John Smith's name. So if you get an error message like that, don't worry about it. All that's happened is you didn't put a variable there to say only show if that is set. All right, so now we can go ahead and move on and actually retrieving the messages for each individual thing. And we'll do that in our next video.